Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 15th of July of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Ukraine. Very interesting piece of news is coming from the city of Kiev. The Верховная Rada, the parliament of Ukraine, extended martial law and mobilization in Ukraine for the 16th time, almost unanimously voting in favor of the proposal submitted by Zelensky. And this martial law will be finished just in the beginning of November. So basically, Zelensky has 90 days of the next martial law and mobilization process, and he has 20 days of July and August of the current martial law. So basically, Zelensky is free-handed, has no problems, has no barriers to carry out another military operation or another small war, another small fight with the Russians for the next 110 days. And the most important is that the Western countries, the United States of America and NATO promised and gave guarantees to Zelensky that during this period of time he will get as many as possible weapons and arms. By the way, this was stated by the President of the United States of America. He promised Zelensky everything. He promised him air defense systems, missiles, and today we got a lot of talks, probably fake news or rumors or something like this, that Trump and Zelensky talked via phone call, and that Trump asked Zelensky why he still didn't attack the city of Moscow with long-range missiles. And Zelensky told him that Ukraine doesn't have weapon for this. So now Ukraine most likely will have this weapon. And now the most important question is what exactly Trump was trying to tell us or trying to tell Russia when he was talking about 50 days. And it seems that he wasn't talking that Russia, you have 50 days to finish every single your offensive operation that you started. We give this 50 days for Ukraine. So they will use this 50 days for another probably offensive operation, for another adventure somewhere along the border with the purpose to improve their positions as much as possible before the beginning of real talks and real negotiation process between Russia and Ukraine. You know that Russia reacted to these statements of Donald Trump. Trump's statements are very serious. That was stated by Dmitry Peskov. Trump's new statements are very serious, and the Kremlin needs time to analyze them. The Russian Kremlin spokesman said, adding that if Russian President Vladimir Putin considers it necessary, he will comment on the statements of his American counterpart. So as you can see, the Russians think that Trump's statements are very serious, and obviously they will think a little bit before making additional probably decisions regarding the situation. As for now, we know that Keith Kellogg, the special envoy of the United States of America, is on the territory of Ukraine, so that is why the Russians are not attacking Ukraine with missiles and drones. They don't want to create this very critical situation in the relations between Russia and the United States of America. They will wait until the end of this week because Keith Kellogg promised to stay in Kiev just until the end of this week. And most likely when he leaves Ukraine, the Russians will begin bombing and attacking the entire territory of Ukraine with everything they have. Because most likely exactly during this period of time when the Russians are not bombing and attacking Ukraine, while Keith Kellogg is on the territory of Kiev, the Western countries are sending millions of rounds, missiles, tanks, vehicles, everything they have to Ukraine from first side to stabilize the situation along the line of combat contact, but from the other side most likely to carry out another adventure offensive operation deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation during the next 50 days. And I would like to remind you that Ukrainian Suja offensive operation started almost a year ago. So almost also in July or in the late July or at the beginning of August, the Ukrainians at the end of July probably, I don't remember for sure, but somewhere at this period of time, the Ukrainians exactly a year ago started their Kursk offensive operation that changed the situation along the line of combat contact. The Russians managed to stabilize the situation, yes, but it took them more than 6 months to do this. And it took just around 40 or 50 days for Ukrainians for their offensive operation that allowed them to break through deep inside of the territory of the Kursk region. So once again, the same numbers, the same time, let's say ranges and so on. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. And first, let's talk about the situation in the South Donetsk direction and Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Very interesting video was published today by the Russian sources, this one. And in this video, according to the group of forces East, we can see how Russians were taking under complete control the settlement of Voskresenka. Just a regular video, lots of attacks, lots of explosions, then the Russians began using drones, attacking vehicles and so on. And as usual, in the final part of this video, we can see many places where the Russians raise their flags. And this is the most interesting and funny thing. If you have possibility to watch this video carefully, you're gonna see that during this video the Russians raised probably 4 or 5 flags all over the entire territory of Voskresenka. So for example, let's take a look at this moment. So here we can see the Russian flag, and then we can see how drone was zooming out from this area and showing the entire village of Voskresenka from another perspective. And the thing is that the place where the Russians raised their flag has nothing common with the area where Russian drone was zooming out. So when talking about every single episode where Russian soldiers raised their flags, they weren't geolocated on the territory of Voskresenka. Lots of mappers, lots of ascenters were trying to geolocate every single flag from this video, and nobody managed to do this. And it seems that it's just something like a video that was created from many episodes from different sides. Anyway, we adjusted the village of Voskresenka in Russian favor, but as we understand, we adjusted the village not based on this video, because this video doesn't prove anything. We adjusted the map based on the report that was published by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, because they confirmed today that the village of Voskresenka was taken by the Russians and secured. So, for example, let's compare the map between the dates. Now, in front of your screens, you can see the situation by the end of the 14th of July of 2025. This is the situation. The village was under complete Russian control. And this, during the 15th of July, the Russians secured the area completely, but based on the report of the Minister of Defense. This video has nothing common with the village of Voskresenka. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pakovsk direction. The situation here is very critical, and the Ukrainians are saying that the situation is not just critical, but the situation is desperate. The Russians continue their offensive operation not just from the northeastern direction. Today we got a very interesting and detailed summary from the soldier on the ground. He says that the Russians are trying to enter the city of Pakovsk and to outflank the city of the Pakovsk and Pakovsk agglomeration, not just from the northeast. We discussed many times Russian offensive and Russian progress during the previous videos exactly in this area. The Ukrainians are saying that the Russians launched their offensive operation in the southwestern part. This let's say, source reported that the Russians secured the village of Zverova, and this source stated that the area around this landfill and around this mine is already a gray zone. So there are very heavy clashes, and according to him, it seems the Russians are about to establish complete control over this territory. Furthermore, currently, according to the same source, the Russians are advancing along the railways in the direction of Novoukrainka and Chinchina. So according to him, summarizing everything, currently the Russians are about to establish complete control over these territories. So we know that at the same time, the Russians are trying to advance in the northeastern direction with the purpose to establish complete control over these territories. So the battle for Pakovsk has begun, and most likely the Russians will try to establish complete control over the territory of Pakovsk in coming days, and probably within the next 50 days before Trump will impose additional sanctions on the Russian Federation. So let's wait and see what is going to be next, but obviously the Russians have very ambitious targets. Now Ukraine will get a lot of weapons, and we'll see who is going to win this decisive battle. Now let's move further and let's discuss, or let's continue our discussion that we started during the previous video about the situation to the south of Kleban-Byksky pocket. The most important settlement in this area is the village of Novaspa. During the previous video we discussed this, let's say, this moment, how Russian soldiers raised Russian flags in the most central and the southwestern part of the settlement, and based on this video we adjusted this territory. But later we got another video now from the northwestern part of the settlement, this one, and here we can see another group of Russian soldiers, forces that raised a Russian flag in the most northwestern part of the settlement. Furthermore, today we got a report from the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, and according to this report, the Russians secured completely the village of Novaspa. So based on these two videos, based on the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, we have colored the village of Novaspa completely in Russian favor. So this is the situation by the end of the 14th of July, and this is the situation by the end of the 15th of July. And now it's become clear that Ukrainians who are currently located on the territory of the settlement of Sherbinovka were caught in cauldron by the Russians without any chances for evacuation. So we expect that coming hours, these coming nights, the Ukrainians will try to break through the encirclement and to evacuate their soldiers. We are not talking about thousands of Ukrainians, we're just talking about several hundreds, but when talking about current situation along the line of combat contact, every single soldier is very important, and when talking about hundreds, this is not important. This is a vital question for both the Russians and the Ukrainians. So they most likely will not be able to evacuate themselves. And after the fall of Sherbinovka, which most likely is going to happen during upcoming night, the Russians will continue their offensive operation further, and the battle for Katerinovka and the settlement of Kleban-Byk will start. And these are final statements, villages in the direction of the Kleban-Byksky pocket. Furthermore, we have changes in the area of village of Yablunovka. The Russians managed to establish control for more than 50% of the settlement, and the Russians continue their offensive. So it seems that the battle for the southern pocket will be finished during the next 2 weeks. At least we are talking about the village of Yablunovka, Alexandra Kalinova, Sherbinovka, Novaspa. Most likely the villages of Katerinovka and Kleban-Byk will stay under Ukraine control probably for another month, maybe less. Now let's move further. As for the city of Chasiv Yar and the city of Siversk, as you can see, we have no changes. We have just lots of FPV drones, lots of attacks, big activity of Russian forces. They are hunting and destroying Ukrainian vehicles, trying to prevent rotation process, to destroy as many as possible warehouses, ammo depots, different equipment, and so on. But as you can see, without changes. So the Russians control the situation. They establish complete control over this territory. But as for now, they are not in a hurry to improve their positions on the ground. As for the Kupiansk direction, during the previous 24 hours, we had very interesting changes. And first, let's talk about the Leman area. According to information we have, according to several pro-Russian resources, the Russians managed to break through Ukrainian defense and to answer the settlement of Serednya, which is located basically on the Ukrainian side on the western bank of the river of Nitrius. So this territory is already under complete Russian control, and the Russians are trying to dig in deeper. Few more important things. This village is another settlement that allows the Russians to get closer to the city of Leman, and this settlement is located on the Ukrainian side of the river of Nitrius, which is very important. And the battle for Shandrigalovo most likely is going to start very soon. At the same time, the Russians continue improving their positions to the northern flank, towards the settlement of Borova. Additional changes were made based on the video published by the Ukrainian sources. Now let's discuss the situation in the northern Kupiansk direction, and today several pro-Russian resources reported that the Russians managed to break through Ukrainian defense in the most eastern part of the Kupiansky pocket, and as a result of offensive, the Russians answered the settlement of Pishana. So the Russian sources are saying about the situation that looks like something like this. So the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over this territory, and currently the clashes are taking place for the settlement of Pishana. This is very important because now we see that the Russians, after they managed to improve their positions to the north of the city of Kupiansk and to the northwest, are trying to shorten the lines and to get as close as possible to the city of Kupiansk now from the east. We are going to follow this situation because we believe that these changes in the area of Pishana are not the only changes that we're going to see during upcoming days. As for the northern Kupiansk direction, we have just small adjustments based on the video published by the Ukrainian side. We will not open this video because there are too many violence. This is the situation by the end of the 14th of July, and this is the situation by the end of the 15th of July. The Russians improved their positions and secured these huge forest belts in the vicinity of Kamenka. As for the Sumy direction, we have no changes in this area, just several reports that the Russians managed to finish the battle for Yunakievka. Today, for the first time since the beginning of the battle for Yunakievka, very reliable pro-Russian resources reported that the settlement of Yunakievka was completely secured. Intense fighting is also taking place to the east of the Totkinsky direction. After the liberation of Yunakievka, our paratroopers, the Russians are saying about their forces, from the 11th Airborne Brigade consolidated their success by advancing further along the road to Krapovshina. So the Russians are saying that the village was taken and that currently the clashes are taking place on the way towards the village of Krapovshina, which is located on the second defense belt of the armored forces of Ukraine. So if this information is correct, most likely tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm control over this territory, which means that the battle for the second defense layer is going to start probably these hours or these days. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.